Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I'm GC Smith, and welcome to Day 7 of the Battle for Zendikar spoiler season. And boy, have we got a lot of cards to look at today. So let's start as quick as we can with Stalker. 2 black-red for a 5/3 Eldrazi creature at rare with Devoid, Haste, and at the beginning of your each end step, if you control no other colors creatures, return Stalker to its owner's hand. So there's one thing to highlight here. It says each end step, not just your end step. So it is possible for your opponent to force it back to your hand at the beginning of their end step by killing your other creatures, which is something they may want to do for whatever reason to tax your mana or something like that. That said, this basically is a dash creature that has the opportunity of always staying on the field, but always having haste. And at 5/3 for 4, this creature has the body and the price to really move it. A really nice spoiler, and I definitely think it's the red-black version of Siege Rhino. It has an immediate impact the turn it's played, a bit like Siege Rhino, and has high power. And just it's everything an aggressive deck wants at the 4 slot. It's just a really good card. Absolutely love it. We'll definitely see playing constructed and limited. It's just so good. Not much else to say about that. Next up, we have Horribly Awry. 1 in the blue for a instant with Devoid at uncommon. Counter targets creature spell with converted mana cost 4 or less. If the spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it to its owner's library. A creature counter spell at 2 that isn't really expensive to cast because it's not double blue. Yeah, I like this. It hits every creature that's relevant in the early game and opens the way for your other counters to carry the late game. As long as we do get an Awaken counterspell, cancel version, this card is definitely going to see play. If we don't, well, it's going to be tricky because building your deck filled with things that only hit creatures and then other spells that only hit things above 4. You know, this does play okay with Disdainful Stroke, I guess, which I guess will get it to see play. Definitely will see some play, though. I'm not sure where and when, but it definitely will. Next up, we have Spawning Bed, an uncommon land that taps to add colorless mana to your pool, or pay 6, tap and sacrifice it, put 3 1/1 Eldrazi Scions onto the battlefield. Limited playable, certainly, and possibly constructed playable in certain decks that really want Eldrazi Scion. Do you really want to pay 6 mana to ramp you up for 3 next turn that may die? Possibly? I don't know. Some decks will want it, some decks won't. But it's a card, I guess, and it does something. Next up, we have Woodland Wanderer. 3 in a green for a rare creature elemental. 2/2. Vigilance with Trample. And Converge. When it enters the battlefield, it enters the battlefield with 1/1 counters equal to the number of colours and mana spent to play with. So at the minimum, it is a 3/3 for 4. But it can become up to a 6/6 for 4. So there's always that. Who wouldn't love a 6/6 for 4 with Vigilance and Trample? I know I would, and I know many decks would as well. This card is going to see some ridiculous play in a 4-color deck that somehow gets built. I thought there was someone, I think it was Maharu, can't say his name properly, that proposed a 5-color deck that had 12 sources of each mana, I think it was. It was ridiculously fun looking, at least. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see his card. Definitely see some play. It'll probably be one of the more valuable rares of the set. It's just priced to move, and yeah, it's just really good and currently undervalued, I think. So next up, we have a cycle of spell lands. You know, the other day I mentioned that we're going to be getting another cycle of lands. Well, here it is at common. 1 in each of the colours that each only adds 1 mana to your pool, or 1 colour to your pool. So it can only add the colour respective colour, but boy do these have beautiful art, and they all have enter the battlefield effects. So let's start in Wyborg order, I guess, and start at white. Sandstep Bridge enters the battlefield tapped, and when it does, you get to give target creature +1/+1 and vigilance until end of turn. Pretty neat effect, actually. Definitely very strong and limited. All of these are strong and limited, by the way. But also possibly playable in a white aggro deck in standard. The fact that it isn't plains can hurt it a little bit because you can't fetch it with Knight of the White Orchid, but it's a really nice effect. Next up, we have Skyline Cascade. It enters the battlefield tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, target creature opponent controls doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. A brilliant early play in control decks. While it isn't fetchable, it definitely buys you the tempo you need to possibly stabilize the game, and that's all that counts. With a new 2-mana counterspell that hits creatures, you don't really need to worry about playing a tapped land on turn 3, because you just need to leave 2 mana up from that point onwards. And this card can buy a lot of tempo and a lot of play, and we'll probably see players of 2 to 3 of in various control decks. Mortuary Mire adds a black to your pool, but when it enters the battlefield tapped, or when it enters the battlefield, it enters tapped. When it enters the battlefield, put a creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. Downright playable, and probably the most constructed playable of all of these cards, though I can easily be wrong. The ability to buy back a Rhino or a Den Protector on top of your library, well, is pretty powerful in Abzan, and I'm really surprised they put this effect on a common land. Imagine this in Limited. Oh boy, that's going to hurt a lot. Looming Spies is the red part of the cycle. When it enters the battlefield, target creature gets +1/+1 and first strike into end of turn. Oh boy, a red-white deck with Sandstone Bridge and Looming Spies is already scaring me. Great land. +1/+1 and first strike on any creature really gets it through or really helps it trade through. Oh, and if you somehow have a way to put this on the battlefield, instant speed, it's going to blow open combat. Hello, Ataka's Command, finally having lands playable, worth putting in middle of combat and using the instant speed version of that. Yeah, Looming Spires will probably see play in red-green aggro decks. I can't see a reason why it wouldn't. Spell lands is generally where you'd like to have your lands that enter the battlefield after turns 2 and 3. You generally want lands that do something, give you extra value, and Looming Spires definitely does it, and we'll probably see some play in aggro decks. And Third Elf Thicket is the final one of our cards of the cycle. It's the green version. When it enters the battlefield, you may look at the top 5 cards of your library. If you do, reveal up to 1 basic land card from among them, put that card on the top, and the rest on the bottom in any order. Really powerful card. When it does ditch a lot of cards, it really enables the 5-color strategy in Limited, and as you can expect, this card will see a lot of first picks. There will be people trying to play 5-color allies converge deck in Limited, possibly me among them when I ever get to draft, so it's definitely going to see some play. Next up, we have Molten Nursery, 2 and a red for enchantment with uncommon enchantment with Devoid. Whenever you cast a colour spell, Molten Nursery deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Limited chaff, playable only because it can kill 1/1 Scions every time you cast a colour spell, and there's enough colour spells looks like at least there's enough colours for you to be able to get some, which makes this at least slightly playable and limited, especially because it can wreck their opponent's ramp plan. But beyond that, not really that an exciting card to look at all. Next up, we have Quarantine Field, XX white for a mythic enchantment. Quarantine enters the battlefield for X isolation counters on it. When Quarantine Field enters the battlefield, for each isolation counter on it, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent opponent controls. This card is ridiculously playable. Oh, until they enter the battlefield, until this leaves the battlefield anyway. This is a powerful card. 1 mana more than Oblivion Ring for an Oblivion Ring or Banishing Light effect. But then at late game, it hits multiple creatures or multiple permanents, which is valuable. This card will see some play in control decks. Never going to be a 4 of. It's far too expensive to be a 4 of. But as a 2 of, as a flexible removal spell that hits multiple permanents and doesn't affect your own stuff, sure. And it's mono white's only way to answer walkers in the moment. Does stop you having to splash multiple colours or black and stuff to have access to Utter End, but ultimately I'd still prefer Utter End at the moment. 4 mana I can at least justify with instant speed, not with a sorcery speed removal spell that the opponent can get rid of and get their stuff back. Again, though, it will see some play, and I might play it as a 2 of, it just seems so clunky, but I'm prepared to be proven wrong and shown it's amazing in the Pro Tour. Retreat to Valakut is our next card, 2 and a red for an enchantment with landfall. Yes, we've got the rest of the retreat cycle today. For this one, when a land enters the battlefield, choose one. Target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn, or target creature can't block this turn. A very powerful effect in the aggro decks, especially in limited, when an opponent just has one big blocker. Being able to stop it blocking every turn is going to be good. And if they haven't got a blocker, you just pump your creatures up and attack through for more damage. Very good spell, enchantment, and definitely will see some play in limited. Retreat to Hagara is the black part of this cycle. 2 and a black for a enchantment. Landfall. When enters the battlefield, choose one. Target creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn, and gains death touch until end of turn. Or each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Very good effects. Has a really good effect if you have a creature that you really want to swing with. They don't want to block it. Has also got a really good effect if you don't have creatures. Note also it has a very good defensive ability by gaining death touch to a creature, being able to always kill your opponent's creature, and has a very good aggressive. I guess the +1 power is really good as well because it guarantees that any creature will have power when attacking, so death touch is always relevant. But also it'll always have more than 1 power if it already had 1, meaning double blocking is going to hurt your opponent. Very good to land. And if you can trigger instant speed, ruins blocks. And the blue part of the cycle, 2 in the blue for Retreat to Coral Helm. When a land enters the battlefield, you may choose one of these. You may tap or untap target creature and scry 1. I can already hear a Bant combo deck in Modern that uses this to basically win with Knight of the Reliquary, because you can tap it to sacrifice a land and get a land from your library and put it into the battlefield, and then untap with this trigger, and yeah, decent combo piece actually for that deck, although you are trying to win with just 1 creature, so it could go awry if your opponent has any sort of blocker, but you are going to have the biggest version of any 3-drop creature on the field. Next up we have its other ability, Scry 1, which is very relevant with a land. Sorry, I should have actually mentioned that. Wow, completely slipped my mind. Yeah, very good. Scry 1. Next up we have Ugin's Insight, 3 blue for sorcery rare. Scry X, where X is the highest converted mana cost among opponents you control, and then draw 3 cards. This card is so hard to evaluate. 5 mana is really where you want your instant draw spells, and so it's really hard to justify that on the simple basis of drawing 3 cards. Tapping out to draw 3 cards really can punish you, but then you realise it's basically a tutor on the right board state. Even with a 4 mana cost permanent on the battlefield, this is 5 mana for Scry 4, draw 3. Very powerful effect. And if you have Ugin, that is Scry 8, draw 3. Yeah, very powerful effect indeed. Scale, I mean, it's not so good when you don't have a Scry effect, because if you don't have any permanents on the battlefield, you're only going to be drawing 3 at sorcery speed, and at that point you might as well run Jace's Ingenuity. But that's not going to be in the format, and this is, and wow, it's a decent draw spell. Again, you're going to have to determine how big a deck we build, like what kind of deck we build to determine how playable this card is. You're definitely going to be wanting to run things like Ulamog, oh boy, cards like the Dragon Lord Odjutai to really make this playable. But it definitely will see some play, even if it's only ever as a 2-of. It's still a very powerful effect when it's played. It's a bit like the other Scry draw spell that was sorcery speed, where you reveal a permanent and reveal like a card on top of your library and draw cards equal to its power mana cost. This is very similar, except it's Scry X and then you only draw 3, but the Scry X is ridiculously powerful. Next up we have Wasteland Strangler, 2 and a black for rare Eldrazi Processor with Devoid. This one does only process 1 card, however, unlike the other usual one, which is put 2 cards. So whenever Wasteland Strangler enters the battlefield, you may put a card from an opponent owns from exile into that player's graveyard. If you do, target creature gets -3 until -3 until end of turn. A very powerful removal spell that gives you a creature at the same time if you've already managed to ingest a card or 2. I just really like this card, and the fact it kind of reminds me a little bit of Emrakul in some regard, but it also reminds you of a giant mushroom in other regards. I think this card will definitely see some play. How much, I won't know. It really depends on the deck, but I can definitely see seeing play in a control shell that has access to that blue spell. Counter your creature, exile it, play this, kill your other creature, have a creature, have fun, you guys. Definitely going to be quite fun to play. And then finally for today, at least so far, and any cards spoiled after this will go tomorrow. Angelic Captain, 3 red white for a creature angel ally at rare, and it's for 4/3 with flying, and whenever it attacks it gets +1/+1 for each other attacking ally. This is a decent card. It really pushes the idea of allies being this horde army that just attacks, and then you have a 4/3 flyer that's massive. Kind of reminds me though a little bit of that one card from Return to the Feroz card. When it attacks, it gets +1/+0 for each attacking creature. This one is a bit more specific. It has to be allies that are attacking, but it also gets toughness as well as power, which is a lot bigger. Being able to actually survive the attack, this flyer is going to be big. Definitely the top of an ally curve, but it really depends if we get a lot more playable allies. A very good card nonetheless. So that's all the spoilers today. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and I will be doing more this week. I've got a few more other videos planned as well, in addition to spoilers. Hopefully I can get those recorded and edited and put up for you guys. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.